What was it that spawned the murder of Vactor?
You earned it. No.
My guest today is the head writer on Netflix's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the author of the greatest volume of Batgirl mankind has ever seen. IMDb says he's known for producing such television shows as Shadowhunters, Sleepy Hollow, Defiance, and Motherland. Never heard of any of them. I know him as the guy who killed me in not one but two different mediums, both comic and televised. He's a husband, a father, and he's the nicest lactose intolerant man I've ever met in my life. Mr. Bryan Q. Miller, welcome to the Vectorverse.
Thank you. I made sure to not have any milk before I sat down. So you have my undivided attention.
Excellent. I very much appreciate you joining me today. You were always very kind to me and very generous with your time. So today is no exception. But I wanted to get right into it. My first question for Mr. Bryan Q. Miller.
Yes.
Why are you obsessed with me? Why do you enjoy murdering me in different mediums? What was it that spawned the murder of Vactor?
You earned it. No. I think it was just a fun thing to do. I don't know, because like especially because like when we started doing that stuff too, like I had just like come up with the writing stuff, and then like I just like started doing stuff like podcasts and everything with you guys, and so it was just like this fun, like because normally with writing you're in a submarine, like you're just like there's no interaction with the outside world, especially then, and this was like 10 years ago at this point. So like, so at that point, like it wasn't as active, as like, James Gunn getting in fights with people on Twitter, that didn't really happen as much. So, so it was just kind of a way to be like, I hear you, I see you, and I'm going to kill you.
And for those of you who have not been around with us for 10 years. I used to host a Batman podcast with Mr. Hunter Camp, and we kind of were interviewing creatives, and we were trying to get anyone who was associated with the Bat family at the time. We were actually reviewing every single Batman book that was coming out at the time. And
there were a lot.
There was a ton of Bat family books at the time. And the one that stood out to me was a guy with the Q for his middle initial. I said, who is this guy? This is someone I need to figure out. But actually, Hunter was the one who scheduled the interview. So if it wasn't for Hunter Camp, I would have never met Bryan Q. Miller. So I'm very happy for that situation. But at the time, we had a podcast interview. And then after that, you put both Hunter and I's names into Batgirl and then also into Smallville. I think Hunter got cut, but I made the final cut if I recall that correctly, but I died. Agent Vactor died on screen.
Yeah, I think it was Agents Vactor.
I think so.
In Camp. I think. Definitely Vactor got voiced. I know. Well, and then I got the picture of you guys and sent it to, I think Perry Perez was doing the art for the issue where you guys died in Batgirl. It was 23. I think you guys were cops at the top of issue 23.
Yes. So that was my proudest moment in my life. I remember going to work that day and handing out copies to everyone. I'm in a comic book, everyone. Here's a picture of me, and I die on this page. So that was even to this day. When I met my wife, I said, I was in a comic book. I was killed in a comic book. So I'm very happy.
Get a tattoo, like right there.
Yeah, I should do that.
Just your little face, like oh.
Now that you say that, that was not on my mind before, but it is now on my mind. So thank you very much for that image, and for also spreading the Vactor name, putting it out there. I have you to thank for
it's
that.
A brand. It's a brand worthy of of spreading far and wide.
Yes, especially with my new Vectorverse podcast, which I'm very happy that you joined me, because I was doing this podcast under Comic Book Kaiju, and so now I'm branding it Vactor. I'm doing the Vectorverse, so I'm glad you're here to join me for this.
Congratulations on the Vectorverse.
I'm very happy on this new endeavor. I'm also very happy that Bryan Q. Miller exists. So I want to know, what is Bryan Q. Miller's origin story? And you have two. So you have, normally I ask my guest, what is your comic book origin story as a reader? but you have one as a writer. So I want to get both of those. What hooked you? What got you into the world of comic books?
I mean, from the reading standpoint, I had wanted to be like a comic reader for a long time since I was little, but we didn't have a shop. So it's not like there was a way from, and library at the time, at least, didn't have stuff like that. I had, it was a big, like, oversized format. It was almost like, it felt like coloring book material, but it was like a Batman and the Hulk like crossover thing that had to do with like Eclipso diamonds or something that the Joker had. I had like one of those, and I want to say the other thing I had was there was a big, larger format thing of the Superman, Spider-Man. With the construction site. And so I had those for a while, and that was just kind of it. So aside from, like watching Super Friends and stuff, and then eventually like Batman the Animated Series, like that was it. So when we moved out here to California, and this is 2002-ish, I ended up by 2003, 2004 working retail, and there was a spinner rack in the magazine section at the bookstore. And so that kind of, and we had a big aisle with a bunch of just graphic novels. And you could, borrow 2 at a time, I think was the most you could borrow, as long as you didn't like do anything horrible to them, so you could still sell them. But that's just kind of when I started like digging into back stuff at that point, because it was, what was it when I started with the spinner rack? It was right around then, I think, was Ultimate Spider-Man had been around for a while. And I want to say like House of M maybe was something that was like new monthly on the stands, and like Infinite Crisis. I think those were the 2 events. I remember this. By the time 52 rolled around, which I love, I was buying 52 because I found out where the comic shop was, and I at least had enough beyond monthly rent and bills to be like, there's a weekly comic. I can go into that place every week. And so that's kind of when I got in. But I think like what locked me in was New Frontier. I think that was, that's the one like absolute edition, the giant, that I have on my bookshelf. Yeah. It's fantastic. It's my favorite. So I think, what was the other one? It was, it weirdly, it was a bunch of Elseworlds type stuff that got me in, which I think is what it's supposed to do. It was New Frontier, and then what was the Marvel thing where they were like in Pilgrim times? It was like 1602, 1601, something like that. 1601, 1602.
Something like that.
I remember reading that at the time too, and really digging that. And so what was great about having that aisle at the bookstore was that, if you had no idea, like, I like Nightwing in Infinite Crisis. There's Nightwing books I can read. And so going back into like the Devin Grayson stuff, and when he was a mob enforcer, I think, in one of the runs, or there was some.
That sounds about right.
But that's kind of how I caught up on a lot of older stuff too. Ultimate Fantastic Four, I think, was fresh-ish right around. And Ultimates. My goodness, that was one of my first trades I bought was Ultimates. So, and that was before I even started, like there's other comic book companies. Like that was like the big thing when I went in. I was like, oh Jesus, now there's so much. I don't know what I'm supposed to read and what I'm not supposed to read. I think Saga I probably hit for a while then at the shop. But again, it was like limited income. So there wasn't that much. So I had to like pick and choose. So and I feel like diminishing returns, like no offense to anyone who worked on what came after 52. It was Countdown, right? I think that's the weekly that's the weekly that I was like, all right. Like it just wasn't, I don't know if I was like weeklied out. Like I was just burned out on weeklies at that point. But that's kind of when I fell out a little bit. But then that opened up holes in that budget to just pick up other stuff and see what was what. So Trials of Shazam,
was a great time.
Judd Winnick. There was a bunch of stuff. There was a bunch of stuff, man. And having the freedom, like it was like a little bit of like a childhood thing where it was like, I can just go buy comics now. Okay, great. That's something people always did in TV and the movies. I go buy comics now. So I would go do that whenever I could. And every now and then with my oldest, we sneak over to the shop. Not as often, but we do still go over every now and then.
Nice. That was a great time. That everything you're saying reminds me of that time in my life when I was picking up those books. And it was for me discovering that the library had comics. I was like, I can get comics for free at the library. That was one. And then podcasts at that time, that was when I got into podcasting in general. And I said, oh, what topics can I follow? All right. I'm into comics. I'm into, whatever it was at the time, music, technology, any of my interests. I was like, there's a podcast for that. There's somebody doing a podcast for that. So yeah, that was, I want to say 04, 05, around that time. And even, like you said, 52 up to that point. I ended up moving from Arizona to Memphis, and then got in touch. That was when I started doing comic book podcasting. So yeah, this was a very fertile period in the comic book world and in my world. So that is fantastic. So what was the transition from reader to writer of comic books?
We had when I wound up getting staffed and writing on Smallville, we would get from DC every month like a long box of everything that they published.
What?
That the office just had this library. So because I was an intern first, so as an intern, then moving up as an assistant, and then onto staff, no one really, those boxes would just stack and they would just sit and nobody would touch them. So I was like, well, let me just organize. Like it just turned into this thing of like cataloging, like in my brain. So then when we, and certainly, reading whatever I wanted to from that. But when it got into like figuring out storylines or like what heroes do we want to see this year? Or what villains do we want to see? Suddenly, because I had done all that filing, like I just was like, oh, the encyclopedia. Like suddenly it was just like, oh, you know what? No, I'll show you what that guy looks like. I'll be right back, and run down the hallway and come back and, and like, oh, this is the Ultra Humanite, or like whatever it is, and show the picture. Or like we, when at one point we did our JSA episodes and we had the execs over for the pitch. There were those really nice one shots that I think Alex Ross did all the covers for. That were Justice Society, where it was like Fate and Stargirl, and so we were able to use those as like our props when we were doing it. Like, this is who we're talking about now, and this is who we're talking about now. But we had all those in the boxes. So all of that stuff was kind of how the worlds crossed a little bit, and then we had Mr. Jeff Johns came in to. Was it the JSA episodes? No, it was before that. It was the Legion episodes, Legion of Superheroes.
Oh, nice.
And he had done that episode for us, and so he and I just started talking because I was the guy who knew the library. So, like at lunch and stuff, I was like, "How do you do what you guys do?" And so he said, "Well, what you should do is just go out to the con and just like meet a few of the editors at DC. I'll let them know that you're coming." I'm like, "Which con?" He's like, "Oh, the New York one." I was like, the one that's next weekend? And he was like, "Yeah, you should go. I'll let him know you're coming." I'm like, sure thing. I'll go next week. So I went, and sat in on a few panels and squatted and just went and introduced myself to a few editors afterwards. And they were like, "Oh yeah, Jeff said you were coming by." And then a few months after that, I want to say I had a lunch with, Didio when he was doing like a West Coast, just like meet all the new potential writers thing. And so he's like, "We have, a couple things that we're looking at right now. We've got Superboy and we've got Batgirl." And I was like, "Well, I'm kind of on a Superboy thing right now, so let me take a crack at the other one." And I think that worked out. And then Jeff Lemire, of course, got with Manipal, they got that Superboy run, which is fantastic. And that's kind of how that all. Oh, you know what? It was even. I apologize. The meeting with Dio was after I had done Teen Titans. I had done 3 issues of Teen Titans first.
Oh yes.
And that was like okay, he can, for better or worse. Like, I took my licks because it was my first time doing it. It's a hard medium to adjust to, but I did it. And so then it was after that, then Dan was doing his rounds. It was like, "Hey, would you like to continue doing some stuff?" So, and there were even maybe a few other Teen Titans issues I wrote that got thrown away because there were some political things that happened. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. But I was going to be around for a little bit longer, I think. But those conversations got very complicated. But it was nice though to just stay in the family and still get to do stuff. And then I wound up with Stephanie. So
nice. And was that a character that you were familiar with at the time, or was it just, you knew Batgirl and all right, this is the current Batgirl. So was it something that you came in with a love for that character, or was it just kind of that at the time that was who was the current Batgirl?
I knew Steph from, and I want to say this is back because Steph had been gone for a while too. Yeah. At that point. So I want to say like when I did the bookstore stuff and would just like hit the aisle, I think I went through like the War Games trades, like, all that whole run that unfortunately ran her into the ground a bit, but it was like War Drums, War Games, right. So I think I knew Steph from that. And then, in passing, I think from the Robin comic, because it wasn't that I disliked the Robin comic. It just wasn't one of the ones that I made sure to follow. But went back and did my research on that one and saw a way forward with her and really enjoyed, their kind of redemption story that we're building for her and for Barbara. And eventually Wendy and Proxy and a whole bunch of other people. But that's kind of how that went.
Oh man. I was not familiar with her character before. And once your run introduced me, it was like, oh, this is my favorite Batgirl. Like I really just kind of jumped full, all in on Stephanie. And it was a character that now I have a great love for. And anytime I see her, it's like, oh yeah, I think about you actually. Every time I see Stephanie, I think about you. So that was some very, very good memories that I have of Stephanie. And
she got the bat back on her chest. She got her bat back on her chest, and she got the purple side stripes again. So there's bits and pieces.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I love your versions and every bit of writing that I've read from you is your sense of humor. I think that's kind of what I'm drawn to. And we even, when we had you on the podcast, that was also another thing that I think endeared you to me, is like, I always thought you were funny, and the writing, I think it just endears everyone when you're writing something. It's like, oh, I'm laughing and I'm having a good time. And that was when I was growing up. That was actually what got me hooked on Spider-Man. And I always tell this story, and it's funny because when you think about Spider-Man now, it's like, I don't really think of him as being funny. Yeah. But when I was growing up, it was all the goofy jokes that he would have, all the like tension, trying to alleviate his anxiety. I always thought that was hilarious as a kid. But then I go back and I look at it, I was like, oh, that's not as funny as I thought it was. Kind of like Garfield, which I was like, oh, I love Garfield. He's the funniest.
We went through a Garfield phase last year. So I was like, oh yeah, Garfield. Oh, it's like, I remember this differently, but okay.
And then once I discovered Calvin and Hobbes, I was like, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be enjoying. Yeah. But yeah, it's always funny that, like I said, humor, it kind of disarms people. And even your Damian issue that, man, and I'm blanking on the number, but it was
5.
The
5, 6, 7. It was 5, 6, 7. The Omen shot with him under the tree. Yeah.
Yes, that might be my single favorite panel from a comic book in all of my comic book reading. Is that because it hit me like I wasn't expecting it, and once I understood what was going on, it was like I was laughing out loud. So kudos to you, sir, as always.
Well, it's how she saw him. Like it was this interesting thing where, and Grant was doing whatever Grant Grant does what Grant does, and that's he's operating in like the sixth dimension, right? But where color is thought and everything is a bat spirit. But it was this kid who like cut off that guy's head. Ghost, I think it was a villain named Ghost, and it just was like a cat with a canary. It was like, look what I did, Pa. And like, I just hooked into that like, and then they let him hang out. Like he just got to stay. So like, you can't, like, there's an aura around a kid like that. And I'm super interested to see, like, because I know in the DC announcement, the James Gunn stuff, Brave and the Bold, like they're talking about Damian's going to be in that.
Yes,
and like it's a line to walk. I know the Harley Quinn cartoon, I think, does it really well. Because I think that's Damian, right? That's Damian in that cartoon, isn't it? Or is it Dick? No, because they have Nightwing. They have Nightwing.
Yeah, because he just got introduced. Yeah. So I think it is Damian and Dick. I don't think Tim is in there, but yeah. I think Damian is in there.
But I'm glad that he exists in similar dimension in other forms. But I'm super interested to see just in general how that manifests and how that goes.
Yeah, I'm curious about the casting. I'm curious about them. So he talked about, James Gunn said that's going to be the start of the Bat family. And I was like, okay, so Damian's going to be the first. There's Barbara, everyone else is not going to already be there. So it kind of, half of me was excited because like, oh yeah, Bat family in live action. But then the other half of me was like, wait a minute, how's that going to work? It's going to be like a backwards. I mean, we don't know for sure, but
we don't know. Yeah, that's the thing. We won't know for probably another like 2 years or something. But
yeah. But I am very interested to see how they do him in live action. I actually introduced him to my wife, and that is like her favorite character now. She loves Damian. Anytime she sees him on any media or marketing material, she always gets a kick out of him.
Well, and I really liked the new outfit they did for him with the gray. Like it was like the gray and red, like this most recent outfit. Like I really like because some of the outfits don't always like sing, but I thought like, oh, okay, that's. It's not a Robin look, but it is still a Robin look. But like it fits, I think, for him. Anyway, I interrupt. I apologize.
Does that one have a hood? The gray one? I don't think so.
I don't think it does. I don't think it does.
Because the hood, like that's how I think of him when I think about, because that was what kind of set him apart from the other Robins. But actually, that leads me to think about what's going on currently in comics. I know that you are, much like myself, a busy father. Do you get a chance to read a lot of stuff today, or is it kind of just bits and pieces?
It's bits and pieces. I don't know that I've been able to, especially like, and Comixology became so hard to use that pour one out for it. Like that was like the workaround was like, okay, well, if I can't make it to the shop, I can still do that to keep up with stuff. And then I just woefully behind. So. What is it? Like recently, I really enjoyed. I started the Jackson Lanzing Star Trek. That's been out for a couple issues. I'm enjoying that so far. I know Chris Cantwell's doing his kind of spinoff or crossover thing with that next month. I think is when Defiant comes out. Yes. So I'm really interested to see like how that world building is going over there. Was it Minor Threats, the Patton Oswalt? Jordan Bloom. I enjoyed that.
Loving Minor Threats.
I'm trying to think what else recently. It's tough, man. Like I feel like the last thing I really like chugged through. And again, there's things you have to read, like from the TV side where you're like, oh, here's a comic we want to turn into something, and so it's always different when you like have to. It's like a book report for school, like when you have to read something versus something. But I think like the last like thing I really chugged through before that was maybe Paper Girls, I think.
Ooh, yes.
A couple of years ago. But it's been real piecemeal for me since then. And not because what I've read hasn't been good. It's just it's hard to get over to the shop. And then once you get behind, I mean, that's like it was different when I worked around the corner from that comic shop when I worked at a bookstore, when you just be like, oh, on the way back to the parking garage, I can stop and see what's new this week. It's a lot more difficult when, especially when you've got to, wrestle past two kids to just get like to the shop. And then if you're alone to then, am I buying comics for me? Or am I buying comics for them? And usually it turns into like, oh, here's some Ninja Turtles. And here's like, there's, it's the amount of comics on my oldest son's floor on a regular basis, or like he's got a pull-out trunk under his bed that's just, like stacked thick And it's just, it's hodgepodge. It's Teen Titans Go, it's Scooby-Doo Mysteries, it's all that stuff. But he loves it. And like the younger one is getting into that stuff now too. So it's,
man,
it's cool. You'll be there soon.
I can't wait to get to that stage. Cause I actually, talked about this on, so I also do a podcast with my dad, and basically the whole premise is he's telling stories from his life for my son. So when my son gets older,
sweet.
He can have
that's adorable. That's really sweet.
Yeah, I appreciate. There was a question I had for my dad where I said, "Did you ever feel impatient with me? Not from a disciplinary standpoint, but for me to grow up, because that's where I'm at right now, where my son is about to turn 2, and he's not at that stage yet where I can watch stuff with him and talk to him. Hey, who's your favorite superhero? Who's your favorite whatever? And I'm impatient. Like I want him to grow up already so I can talk to him. But my dad was like, no, I never had that with you. I didn't even notice when you were growing up. But he probably didn't consume media the way that I do. So I understand, but I can't wait to get to that stage that you're in right now.
There's tiers to it. Like there's tiers where you're going to get to it where you're going to get out ahead of yourself a little bit. And you're like, oh yeah, we're ready for this. It's like, no, clearly 5 minutes in, you are not ready. And then suddenly you're the bad dad who showed the thing you shouldn't have shown. But like we had that with, Aliens, I think we tried. Cause he's like almost 10 now. So we're like, cause I remember like when, cause I didn't see it till I was older. That's a whole other story, but it was because we didn't have cable. And so when it hit HBO, like everybody in second grade was like, oh my God, she's in the elevator and the thing's right there and it opens. And she got the suit. And so I was like, yeah, this is like not everyone else. It seems to be an okay age for that to start. So let's go ahead and try that. And I mean, we didn't even get to LV426. Like we didn't get touchdown. I think we maybe got to like 5x5 drop. And then he was already just like white knuckle. I'm like, you know what? This isn't fun. Let's just do this later. And so we will rejoin it later. So every now and then you're going to get out ahead of your skis, but it'll be okay.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like that right now, even to a certain extent, where I'm like, which animated things are too adult for him at this point? Cause he's 1 as the time of recording this. But yeah, I've had that as well. Now, I wanted to also talk about your involvement in, this is a franchise that, 1982 was the year I was born. So I have memories of He-Man. I remember playing with the action figures. I remember seeing home movies of myself in He-Man apparel.
Sure.
But I don't have a Batman, like I don't have a really good grasp on He-Man from that era. I just remember, hey, it came out, and then like the Dolph Lundgren movie. I remember things like that. So I guess my question for you, what is your He-Man story? And then currently what's going on?
When I was little, again, because I'm only a couple of years older than you, it came on syndicated. I know that. But we were subscribed to Columbia House or something where you would get VHSs. From the catalog, and they all had. I distinctly remember they had matching boxes. They were like red and black boxes for everything that was like one particular studio collection. And so through that, I guess we had to fulfill something. We had some He-Mans that came. So there was like a He-Man catalog of, I guess, the first season. I don't know, maybe like 13 or 14 episodes. And so I just wore those out, like just down into the ground. Because again, we didn't have cable. So it was just like, okay, well, here's some more cartoons to watch. But I think it was that. Like, I want to say toy wise, I maybe had a toy before I saw the cartoon. And it wasn't even He-Man. It was like Merman or Beastman, I think was my first one. But I mean, like, it did what it was supposed to do in the cross, the cross marketing thing of like, oh, well, I want to know more about what this is. What is the story, right? And they even had like the mini comics that came with the figures at that point.
Oh yeah,
little itty bitty comic books.
Yes.
And there's a really cool. I think Dark Horse put it out. I've got it on one of my shelves. It's a compendium of all of those mini comics, but reprinted like in a big hardcover format.
Oh, I need to look that up. Yeah,
which is really cool. It's really cool.
Wow.
It's different, but it's cool. But yeah, so I think that's kind of where that started, and at the same time as Transformers coming in and G.I. Joe and all of that stuff, as was de rigueur in like 84, 85. And then like nothing for a really long time. And then had a meeting with Mattel like a year before I got the job. And they're like, oh, we might be doing some He-Man stuff. We might be doing some other stuff. I was like, oh, well, I loved He-Man when I was little. But it was something I always enjoyed when I was little, but it's not like I was chomping at the bit, like we just said with the kids, to be like, all right, when am I going to show him He-Man? When is that going to happen? It just wasn't, because there had been such a space in time where it didn't exist really as an IP that right. I didn't think he needed it.
That movie might have killed it.
I have my brother-in-law got me a signed. I can't get it. It's over there. Dolph Lundgren, all shirtless, right over there from the movie. But yeah, it was one of those things where when I started going back through it and doing the research, and then my oldest was like, what is that? What are you watching? What? And so I explained it and would show pictures of the toys. And so like he got kind of interested in that. And then what was really nice with my younger one too, as we were getting in, when I got the job and writing the scripts, we were getting in, animatics and storyboards and just like the different steps of the process. It was fun because it was like having like a little micro test audience. Like in my office where it's like, what do you think about that? Did you like that? And so it's actually glommed on with the younger one much more than it has the older one, which is unexpected. But he'll play with the toys and then like do scene for scene stuff like from the show.
Nice.
And then like ask me to clarify things. And I'm like, I wrote that like 3 years ago. I don't know. It was like Google Translate Latin for that spell. Like, I don't know. You know it better than me at this point. And he'll get frustrated. He's like, no, in the episode where, and I'm like, I kind of do. This is one of the rare days when I've got like the merch actually set up because we were doing a video thing. Normally my shelves get raided and they're in bits and pieces in the other room and I have to put them back together. But
nice. Yeah. I was, when I heard that they're bringing He-Man back out again and with 2 series on Netflix, I was like, oh wow, this is like a good moment for He-Man. And also they had that documentary, We Were Toys or something like that.
I think they had 2 of them. There was like an episode of the toys that made us, and then there was another documentary that was like Power of Grayskull or something.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, when those came out, I was like, oh yeah, He-Man's having a moment right now. But with this show in particular, do you feel? I know I've always heard actors, specifically voice actors, say, "Oh yeah, I like doing Disney, I like doing Pixar because my work has always been adult." And this is something that my kids can watch. They can finally watch me in something. Did you have that kind of moment of this one being for a younger audience? Oh, this is my sons can enjoy this, and this is something that I can in the moment we can both have experience with it.
Because there's so much stuff that I've done that by the time they're old enough to even maybe want to watch it, like it might not exist anymore. Right, it could be sold as a tax write-off. I don't know what's going to happen with all that stuff. And other stuff that they're probably never going to care about. And so it was really cool to be working on something where, like, especially once like the merch started coming out, where it was just like, this is from a thing I made, and here are these things. And then like they play with it. Like, it's crazy. Like just having them come in and like I said, with the little one, like reenacting scenes like from the show where that wasn't expected. I didn't need that, but it's just like this weird little side effect of doing it. We're like, oh, that's nice. And it's like a real time nice. It's not, like we talked about with the being in a submarine when you're a writer, like it was very much like, oh, the audience is right here. That's super, super rare to have that. And so I'll, I've got some other animation projects, hopefully knockwood, coming through soon that would be for younger audiences, but I'm still trying to do some live action stuff for, grownups. But it's a nice thing just to kind of have in my life, I think, is just like the notion that like, oh, I can easily just drop the kids into this and share this with the kids. And I know because I made it that it's worry free. Like, as far as like, I know what might scare one in one episode or what might not scare one. And you don't have to I don't really have to worry about that because I know. So it's nice.
Yeah. That's got to be great for peace of mind. And, what I think we can't necessarily talk about, your future projects just yet, but there are a lot of, I guess there are a lot of fires that are being stoked at the moment. And I would love if, when you're able to talk about those things, you would come back to the Vactorverse and share those with me. And I'm loving everything you're producing, everything that you're putting out. When I see Bryan Q. Miller's name, I immediately say, I have to consume this. So keep up the good work, my friend. And I want
thank you, my friend,
everyone out there to take a look. If you have youngsters, if you're on this service called Netflix, it's pretty new. Not a lot of people are on it, but if you've got the means to get in on this Netflix thing, if you're able to share somebody's password, I would 100% recommend He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. There's 3 seasons out right now. You can go and binge all those, have a great time. And if you want to see me die, you can check out season 10 of Smallville and volume 3 of Batgirl. That's what I want. You know how James Gunn got all those sales to go up for all those books that came out?
Authority,
Let's give volume 3 of Batgirl to skyrocket. We'll
go read up on Vactor's demise.
Yeah. Excellent, my friend. Well, Mr. Bryan Q. Miller, like I said, you've always been the nicest guy, the nicest writer I've ever met, no matter what the medium is. And I look forward to the continued journey of Bryan Q. Miller.
Thank you, sir. Please send my love to wife and child.
I will do. I always end every episode by saying, Bryan Q. Miller loves comics, and you should too.